In a story from the post-millennial, Hillary Clinton says Trump is dangerous just one day after a second assassination attempt, suggests charging Americans for spreading propaganda. Here's the video. Listen to it for yourself.
And boosting Trump back in 2016. But I also think there are Americans who are engaged in this kind of propaganda. And whether they should be civilly or even in some cases criminally charged is something that would be a better deterrence because then boosting Trump.
A better deterrence. Hillary Clinton suggests jailing Americans for posting what she called propaganda. There's a big question about where all of this is going. Let me just stress, MSNBC Hillary Clinton, following the second assassination attempt on Trump, had the gall to say Trump is dangerous and that people who are spreading propaganda perhaps should face civil or criminal penalties. What do you think would happen if the Democrat government started going around arresting people for speech? Now, let me tell you, part of me would love to agree with Hillary Clinton because they're the ones that are actually spreading the lies, manipulation, and propaganda. Yeah, but that's no good. It doesn't work that way. It just doesn't. If we are to agree with them, they just weaponize it against us. The question remains, though, what happens to a country if political leaders begin arresting and rounding up people for dissent? Don't take my word for it. Time magazine writes, the U.S. is heading toward a second civil war. Here is how we avoid it. That's right. Tim Pool, in fact, did not say it. He's just reading a headline. But this story, which is from October of 2022, 2 years ago, this story was written well before there was a bullet that grazed the ear of Donald Trump. At the time, he was the front runner for the presidency. He was beating Biden in the polls. Shortly after, Biden drops out of the race. Trump was right back at work. Do you think things have gotten calmer? 2 years ago, when Time magazine said that we were heading towards a civil war, have things gotten more violent and dangerous? Have things calmed down? No sane person could agree that after what just happened with Donald Trump, things have gotten better. And that worries me. That's very worrying. Hillary Clinton wanting people to go to jail. Maddow asked Clinton if she had an antidote for the media to realize that the more offensive he is, the more he can dominate the media space entirely. Clinton responded that his demagoguery, his danger to our country and the world, she told Maddow, sadly, the press is still not able to cover Trump the way that they should. They careen from one outrage to the next. What was outrageous 3 days ago is no longer on the front pages, even though it threatens the physical safety of so many people. Particularly, as you point out, immigrants that he and Vance have decided to demonize. I want to tell you where we're at, my friends. The Biden-Harris administration has brought in hundreds of thousands of migrants from select areas, Haiti being one of them. 15,000 of these individuals were placed in a very Trump-heavy small district in Ohio. Springfield, Ohio, primarily affected. Now, the rhetoric that we're hearing, so the Biden-Harris administration are placing many of these migrants with a path to amnesty and citizenship, voting rights, in heavily Trump areas. This way, after one election cycle, they will vote and likely vote Democrat because Democrats will promise them benefits. It's not a solution to any problem. It's certainly not any kind of long-term solution. In fact, it's long-term degradation. Democrats may end up winning, but what I believe they are doing with these plans is twofold. I believe Democrats are panicking, not just Democrats, but also never Trump or Republicans. The petrodollar is dying. We need more jobs. The jobs report needs to show more jobs were created. But how do you do that? How do you do that without more people? People need to start companies. Companies need to employ. Fertility rate is below replacement. Quite a bit, actually. So they bring in these migrants, give them work permits. They allow illegal immigrants to flood the border, give them work permits. This allows them to fluff and pad the jobs numbers, but it displaces low-skilled labor, meaning working class Americans are going to be negatively impacted. It's going to drive inflation. It's going to cause a massive divide between the wealthy and the poor. But they also place these individuals in areas that vote for Trump. So twofold. You will have large swaths of conservative, America-loving individuals who are now going to live in areas surrounded by migrants with work permits. And this will cause a rift in their ability to vote for who they want and for people like Trump to win. You know, I have to wonder, how many illegal immigrants are in this country? There's wide estimates, 10 to 20 million perhaps. And they don't have to vote in the elections. Their presence gives an electoral vote and a congressional vote to blue states. That means they are voting effectively because we don't vote by popular, we don't win elections by popular vote. Imagine a country where the natural born American citizen, expecting their birthright, which they are entitled to and deserve, sees it ripped away by people who came here illegally, committed crimes, some continuing to do so, and they won't be deported. You want to talk about civil war? That's your recipe for civil war. The State Department's disinfo effort is a pro-censorship sham. We know this, but why is this happening again? We know the State Department was trying to shut down what they call disinformation. They say it's using taxpayer money to smear its critics. A bombshell committee on small business report confirmed the reporting of independent journalist Matt Taibbi and The Examiner. The federal government has fueled a censorship ecosystem impacting not only individuals' First Amendment rights, but the ability of certain small businesses to compete online. One group, Global Disinformation Index, created a blacklist of conservative publications for advertisers to avoid smearing the Post and other major news outlets as risky possible spreaders of false info. I think it's fairly obvious what's happening, but let's talk about it. Newsweek says, Putin ally predicts U.S. will collapse in imminent new civil war. Well, I got to tell you, they want that to happen. They absolutely do. So without getting into too much detail for legal reasons, in areas in which I will stress because people don't want to hear it, but I am a victim and things are happening behind the scenes. The goal of Vladimir Putin and the Russian state is to inflame tensions, to make sure that there is a culture clash in this country. They don't care about supporting causes. Putin is not your friend. There's a lot of people who go online and claim that Putin is defending Christianity. No, he's not. Maybe in Russia, whatever, believe whatever you want to believe. But he's intent on destabilizing the United States, the petrodollar, and it is subterfuge and warfare against the United States. Newsweek says, former Russian Prime Minister Dmitry Medvedev, a close ally of Russian President Vladimir Putin, issued a warning on Saturday predicting the U.S. will collapse in an imminent new civil war amid this year's election over Russian sanctions. Blah, 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 they say. In a Saturday Telegram message, Medvedev, deputy chairman of the Russian Security Council, spoke about the current political climate of the U.S., the 2024 presidential race, which will see Trump go up against Harris. Quote, out of spite for the current administration, Donald Trump has threatened to lift sanctions against Russia. But will he really do it if elected? No, of course not. For all his apparent bravado as an outsider, Trump is ultimately an established insider. Yes, he's an eccentric narcissist, but he's also a pragmatist. As a businessman, Trump understands that sanctions harm the dollar's dominance in the world. However, that's insufficient reason to stage a revolution in the United States and go against the anti-Russia line of the notorious deep state, which is much stronger than any Trump. But what about Harris? You shouldn't expect any surprises from her. She is inexperienced and, according to her enemies, just plain stupid. Beautiful, meaningless speeches and boring, correct answers to questions will be prepared for her, which she will read off a teleprompter while laughing contagiously. There were sanctions against the USSR throughout the 20th century, and they returned on an unprecedented scale in the 21st. So it's sanctions forever. Or rather, until the U.S. collapses during an imminent new civil war. After all, Hollywood makes films about this for a reason. So maybe he's not saying it actually goes there. But I think many people believe this is the direction that we are headed. Time magazine, they write, and this is back in 2022, mind you. Early this summer, I emailed a neighbor of mine, whom we'll call David, and asked him to go for a walk with me in the park. Although we had lived in the same building on the Upper West Side of Manhattan for more than a decade, we had previously only shared pleasantries with one another in the elevator. But this neighbor's political views diametrically opposed my own. Given the dire, toxic runway path to civil war our nation is currently on, and as a professed conflict mediator, bipartisan bridge builder, and depolarization pundit, I felt it incumbent on me to try my best to walk my talk. My spouse also talked me into doing it. He goes on to say, when I greeted David in front of our building, he also appeared ill at ease. Nevertheless, we headed toward the park for a brief jaunt, anxiety in tow. On our way, we chit-chatted about our families, and then I explained to him my reason for reaching out. I said that I was increasingly worried about the political divisions in our country and the growing odds of extreme violence. I was doing my utmost to better understand different perspectives on the situation. He replied, "You mean you don't know any Republicans you can talk to?" When I hesitated, he added, "Any Republicans that like Trump, that is." "That's about right," I admitted. Then he told me about his upbringing. He explained that he is a devout Orthodox Jew born in northeastern France to Talmudic nobility. His grandfather was a village physician and founder of a temple in the Alsace region. I don't know how to pronounce it, sorry. He was raised in the UK and holds a deep conservative values emanating from his religious convictions and his success in global business. I then offered a bit of my own background, a Catholic-born Irish and French Huguenot with Chicago, I'm pronouncing that wrong too, probably, Democratic working class roots, who, much to his astonishment, married a one-half Jew. David inquired about my wife's mother was Jewish, and he exclaimed, "So your children are Jewish?" "They are," I replied. The fact seemed to register. Soon after, we turned to politics. I asked him if he would tell me how he came to support Trump, and he said, "Be happy to." My neighbor told me his thoughts on the underappreciated accomplishments of Trump and of the relentless trials and tribulations he had suffered from the mainstream media and other liberal hacks. He said he had great respect for Trump's business acumen and executive approach to governing, and that Trump's attitudes on cultural issues were very much aligned with the orthodox conservatism of his particular branch of Judaism. As he spoke, David became increasingly animated and agitated, picking up the pace of our walk. He said he believed Obama had dangerously deteriorated America's standing in the world until Trump put a stop to it. He thought that George Soros was individually responsible for the extreme levels of violent crime and discrimination against minorities in our society. I had tried to prepare for our walk, anticipating an awkward and potentially volatile visit. I did a reflection exercise on my intentions for our time together, which prioritized the goals: listen openly and learn from him, avoid becoming too defensive and reactive. I'd also reviewed a chart on the critical differences between debate and dialogue, the latter being more a process of discovery than a win-lose game. He goes on to say, eventually he concluded, should Trump run for president again in 2024? Probably not. With the stupid moves he's made, like going after dead war hero John McCain in Arizona. Should he run again in 2024? Probably not. Well, Trump is. We know that now. He was going to say, will he? I doubt it, but maybe he should. About this time, I reminded David that he might want to get back and check in on his wife. He said, we can go for a few more blocks. He goes on to say, as we stepped in the elevator together, he glanced at the back cover of the book and said, yes, I don't know what we're going to do about this polarization. It seems to get worse and worse. But when you feel so passionate about what's going on, it's hard to stop or know what to do. I said, I think we need to try to do, what we need to try to do is what you and I just did. Meet as often as possible. Okay, so what, right? Big deal. So I took a walk in the park. He says, is this what we'll take to avert another civil war? Not a chance. He says it was a warm-up exercise, a slight adjustment, hopefully for us both. It was just one aspect of a month-long experiment that a small group of worried, well-intentioned Americans piloted together this past summer. I'm a researcher who studies what it takes for deeply divided societies like ours to change course for the better. A group of my former students and colleagues came together virtually over the 4 weeks in July to try out a series of exercise and activities gleaned from this research. I can tell you exactly this. He says, perhaps the most concerning, a survey published last fall found that 80% of Biden voters and 84% of Trump voters view elected officials from the other party as presenting a clear and present danger to American democracy. It also reported that 41% of Biden voters and 52% of Trump voters favor red or blue states seceding from the union to form their own separate country, with 30% of Republicans and 11% of Democrats ready to resort to violence to save the country. The funny thing is, they say that about Republicans. I hear this all the time, and yet it is consistently the left that is engaging in violence. Why? Because the left that will passively support Democrats don't claim to be Democrats. Regardless, I tell you this. It's fascinating to see this story where they say we have to come together and have these conversations. How do we get so dividers? How do we get so divided? mentioning small and large drivers. He goes on to mention macro dividers. You ready for this one? Our 400-year-old legacy of white supremacy, full stop. And there it is. I'll tell you this, my friends. I can break it down for you. It started in the mid-2000s. It started with the internet, the seeds of this mass division. And what I can tell you is this man and these people have, well, some people call it the woke mind virus. I would refer to it as they are living in a paranoid, delusional state crafted by algorithms, which blinds them from seeing reality. Let me explain. Some of you may have heard this, but I will, for those that haven't, this may be enlightening. Or maybe I'm just a crackpot and I'm wrong about everything. But I've had many conversations. Perhaps the best conversation in this area, the most important, was my conversation with Peter Boghossian, James Lindsay, Helen Pluckrose, over what they referred to as intersectionality, or wokeness, essentially, as a non-theistic religion. Peter Boghossian believes, smart man, by the way, that the origin of these ideologies come from the universities, that the universities were crafting and seeding these ideas, which ultimately resulted in what we see today, wokeness. He is incorrect. What he is talking about, this ideology of critical race theory, critical gender theory, critical ideologies that we have been critical of, is only one small component of what I describe as wokeness. Wokeness to me is easily defined as adherence to modern liberal social orthodoxy. That's why woke people will be pro-war, but anti-war at the same time. What do I mean by that? Hassan Piker being a great example. He will defend our involvement in the Ukraine war while seemingly in the same sentence criticizing the military-industrial complex. It's paradoxical. These things don't follow a logical pathway. And the man did this, criticizing a song that I had produced that was just critical of war and revolution in general. He said something, I made a video commenting on something. I said, I agree, military-industrial complex is bad. Why are we giving $200 billion to Ukraine? He then laughs as if it was a bad idea. He says, this guy's really just saying let Ukraine go on their own. Like, what? Is there a difference between the military-industrial complex in the Middle East versus Ukraine? Well, to someone who is deeply entrenched in paradoxical adherence, cult-like adherence to liberal social orthodoxy, logic doesn't matter. All that matters is that you say the things that the cult wants said, even if they don't logically connect. It's a hodgepodge. I can tell you how we got to this point. Starts it with the internet. The internet, of course, in the early days, for those that are familiar with it, was wild. Bulletin board systems, chat groups. What did we have? We had IRC chat. I remember being on IRC. That was fun. That's how we used to play Magic the Gathering online, mind you, with Apprentice. That's what the app was called. You'd go on IRC. You'd say, anyone looking for a game? And then you'd connect and be like, let's play. And it was fun. You play Magic online. Man, what year was this? Like 2000, 2001? Well, social media emerged. And what ends up happening in the early days of social media was that people started to adopt the internet more and more. Now, mobile phones play a big role in this too, but I'll get to that. Ultimately, what happens is the market starts shifting from television, which is hyper-centralized media narratives going out to tens of millions of people, to the internet. People begin reading websites like the Huffington Post instead of the New York Times, online-only platforms. These platforms have low overhead and are able to survive with very low revenue. You don't need massive startup costs or big investment like you would need for a newspaper. However, with mass adoption comes an interesting phenomenon. At a certain point, Facebook realized that the most amount a person could absorb is around having around 300 friends on Facebook or liked posts would result in your feed moving too quickly for you to actually see or engage with anything meaningfully. This presented a problem. In the early days of Facebook, you'd see the posts in reverse chronological order. Your friend would post something, you'd see it. You'd then interact with it. But people had relatively few friends. I mean, in the early days, it was like 100, 200. So you could keep up with what people were posting. Then we got pages, brands, bands, media companies, whatever, and you'd like what they were posting. But eventually people got to over 300 connections, and the posts were moving so quickly, people weren't seeing the people they liked anymore, and this threatened the business. This is when the algorithms were introduced. Facebook decided we need to create something that chooses the best of the content so that people stay on the website longer. And so they did. They programmed algorithms that, such as Facebook, it's all these companies, they programmed algorithms that basically said, of all of the things being posted, show people what is most likely to get engagement. In the early days of YouTube, this resulted in every thumbnail being a woman in a bikini. I am not exaggerating. Take a look at all the early videos. All the big YouTubers in the early days when they were getting started, their thumbnails would be women in a bikini. Many channels developed massive followings with fake thumbnails. YouTube eventually said, hey, no fake thumbnails, we'll ban you for this. Because they were trying to create an algorithm that would show you what you wanted to see, but they couldn't. Here's where it goes. Eventually, what happens? Well, there's a great video I often cite by CGP Grey, one of the OG YouTubers, called something to the effect of like, this video will make you angry, or something to that effect. It talks about how anger is the most likely to induce a reaction on social media. So what happens then is, these media websites like the Huffington Post, like Mike.com, like BuzzFeed, figure out. In the early days, it was listicles and cats. These are the things that everyone thought would go viral online. Charlie bit my finger, things like that, the old memes, if you remember them all. But eventually they realized, hey, we wrote an article about police brutality. We got 1 million views. People don't like injustice. It makes them angry, and they're likely to interact with it because they want to be good. One by one, these platforms started to adopt this. In fact, libertarians who were never really cared about social justice issues all of a sudden couldn't stop talking about racism. You see, it started with some libertarians as police brutality is wrong. They would post these videos of mocking feds, of doing 1A or 2A audits, and then they'd find these pages that when you got a video of a cop stopping a guy or harassing a guy, you'd get 1 million views. 1 million views was cash in the bank. But then they figured something out. If the person was black and it was racist, they got a bigger reaction. One by one, these media companies began to post these things about racism. Racism is bad. Why? This buzzword was generating tons of traffic for them. But then they discovered something very interesting. You see, the way the algorithms work, it's exponential returns. YouTube even tells you this when you make videos. They say, you got more clicks on this video, resulting in more recommendations. Well, guess what? More recommendations mean more clicks. It's a snowball rolling down a hill. The more clicks you get, the more clicks you're going to get, the faster you rise in the algorithm. What happens? These companies figure out that, hey, if I write about sexism, I get X views. If I write about racism, I get Y views. But if you write about racist sexism, you get XY views. That is not X plus Y. That is X times Y, an algorithmic boost. The more views you get, you exponentially increase the return on your views, resulting in the rise of intersectionality. One by one, every single one of these news websites all over the world saw a massive increase in social justice, racism, sexism, police brutality. Countries that for no reason have nothing to do with Americans' history on racism, started having BLM protests because the media outlets saw that American social media algorithms were promoting articles about American issues. What does this do? A couple things. Largely, conservatives weren't following these stories. Many of these conservatives were pro-cop. The bifurcation had begun. More importantly, many of them weren't using these social media platforms in the same way. There were many rural communities with weaker internet, so they weren't as active online as urban communities. I'm talking about very early days of internet. I'm talking about 2000s. Cell phone coverage is the key component. While today you have cell phone coverage basically everywhere, the bifurcation was created. There always was going to be one between Democrats and Republicans. That's obvious with their disagreements. And the internet has only inflamed tensions. I will jump back now to this article to bring it all together. This man talking about how we are heading towards a civil war in 2022 claims that one of the driving forces is 400-year legacy of white supremacy. This person is suffering from deep delusions. That's just true. Now, of course, the left and the woke will say, no, you're wrong, Tim. This country is white supremacist. It's just not true. It's just fundamentally false. The evidence, well, it's called controls in science. We can take a look at every other country and how they treat foreigners, ethnic minorities, and you can see the United States actually has one of the best track records opposing racism and guaranteeing civil rights. This history of white supremacy is a fabrication, an amalgam of garbled nonsense meant to generate clicks. I'll give you a simple version of it. There are a bunch of stories, Elsagate being the easiest way to understand this. If you're not familiar with Elsagate, it was a period in YouTube history that goes down in infamy, where millions upon millions of views were generated in these Benny Hill style silent videos of the Joker, Spider-Man, and Elsa chasing each other around. It was really weird. The algorithm recommended long form videos with these characters in it because children liked them. And so the reaction was, people discovered, if I make a video with Elsa, Spider-Man, and the Joker, I'm going to get 1 million views and I'm going to make 20 grand. So they would. Understand this. Ask yourself why it is. There were so many finger family videos, they call it, because people crack the algorithm to get views, to figure out how to make money. They figure out what the algorithm wants and they make it. And that is what has created this harsh divide in this country, which is driving us, in my opinion, towards civil war. Hillary Clinton, in her delusional mind, is now saying the people who oppose this, who are on the other side, should be arrested and charged. So there's no off-ramp. The only victory that the only way out of this is going to be a harsh political victory of Donald Trump. It's true. Democrats largely live in a deluded state. Now, of course, I'm sorry. Some will say, Tim, you're biased. You're a Republican. You're far right, blah, blah, blah. There's a video from Christopher Rufo of cats on a grill. The media today says it's fake. The corporate press says J.D. Vance and Trump lied about it. Chris Rufo has a guy on the record, more than one, saying they've seen it. He has video of it. He found the grill. But none of that really matters. That's his report. Maybe he's a liar. I don't know. It's possible. But we watched the video. I don't know what else to tell you. You know, at a certain point, we all are going to decide what we think is true. But I'm going to have to go with, there's a bunch of people complaining about this problem. There's a video of it happening. People have posted online for years about eating cats in Haiti. But the media would tell you not to believe your lying eyes. For these Democrats who live in this world where they watch CNN and MSNBC all day, I don't see how meaningful change comes so long as this bifurcated reality continues to exist. The people who believe that we live in a 400-year-old legacy of white supremacy, how we got so divided. Can you believe this? This is what Time magazine is claiming. They're not going to be convinced otherwise. They live and breathe the lies, which says to me, we're heading towards something calamitous. I could be wrong about everything. I hope I am. I hope that in a couple years, maybe I'm sitting in a lounge chair eating buffalo chicken wings, watching, I don't know, the X Games or something, snowboarding perhaps. Donald Trump is shaking hands with Democrat House leader, whatever, and, tax policy is being debated. Wars are simmering down. People in this country are like, man, that was a crazy time. That was a crazy time. Civil strife does not always lead to civil war. The civil rights era was largely considered a period of civil strife in the United States, and it did not result in a civil war. That being said, in our lifetime, I don't think things have ever been this bad. So we'll see. If you think I'm wrong, give me the super chats. Tell me why you think I'm wrong, because I hope I am. I really do. For now, I can tell you this. I'm just some dude who reads the news. I complain on the internet, read the news, and give you my thoughts. Maybe everything I'm breaking down is just not correct, but I'll wrap it up there. Smash this like button. Subscribe to this channel. Share the show with your friends. Become a member by going to timcast.com and clicking join us to support our work. And you can follow me on X at Timcast. Really do appreciate your support. Next segment will be coming up at 4 p.m. on this channel. Thank you all for hanging out, and we will see you all then.